Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and Watchmasters to State of Play on 6 This is our show where we dive into the special particularities of different factions, talk to someone who's been absolutely killing it with that army out there in the world, and get their insights into how the army plays and how you can get the most of it on the tabletop. Now, obviously, it's a fun time. There's a lot of stuff out there right now. There's a lot to be done after Grotmas. So I've been keeping an eye out for people I know doing interesting things. And regrettably, unfortunately, one of the most interesting things done last weekend was by our very own nemesis. It is Jack Tite. We've never had Jack Tite on the show before. Jack, how are you?
I am doing excellent, Tom. Thank you very much. Just here to say that you've resorted to having me on finally. You've put it off long enough, but this time I've done it with something that you can't ignore.
Exactly. That's
entirely new indexes.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's the way to play it. If you want to get on State of Play, you just have to pick something that's not been done much with, and then go and win an event, and that's a pretty good bet. And of course, we are talking about the Saffron Slam, which Jack won at the weekend, just gone with the Deathwatch with their newly restored detachment. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. If the massive Deathwatch Marine in the middle of the screen didn't tip you off, and obviously, I think there's plenty to cover with that, and it'll be very interesting. And I believe you beat some 6++s, so hopefully we'll get some stories about that as well, Jack. I wouldn't want to let them off lightly and avoid their humiliation.
No, of course not. I'm sure Chris has had plenty to say about that.
No, surely not. Okay, before we dive into that, thanks very much for supporting us, guys. Please do hit like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Obviously, we're trying to make as much of this stuff as we can this year for you. We really appreciate it. If you want to sign up and be a YouTube member and support us that way, we'd love you to as well. Wonderful. Okay, Jack, to the uneducated, obviously, our long-time listeners will know you as our nemesis, but what's your deal? Who else are you in 40k in this game of ours?
I believe, to be honest, in the last year or so, I have become known as just a sisters player. Like, I don't know what it is, but everyone seems to think I only play sisters.
Yep.
I think a lot of that is because the last year for me, I think, has been very good.
Yeah.
And I've had an excellent year, really. And most of it was with sisters. But yeah. I've played many things, and I would say I am someone that does enjoy just taking all sorts of random nonsense to all sorts of random events.
I think you do that more than most people, and I love that about you. Especially for the local events, you will try anything, right? It's corn demons or whatever weird thing you want to do.
Yeah, so I ended up deciding to take Deathwatch here because basically, for those who don't know, the reason I ended up taking this is because I played around with Deathwatch a little bit when the edition launched, back when the Wraith Knights were the meta menace everywhere, and GSC were everywhere, and everyone went, well, this Deathwatch thing looks kind of all right into both of those, the anti-Xenos faction and all that. So I thought I played them a little bit back then, and it did all right. But ultimately, I think a lot of people found they still fell victim to Eldar and their reasonable ways at the time. So they got shelved for me eventually, and by the time I even thought about picking them up again, they kind of got shuffled into Imperial Agents. And once the new index came out, I kind of knew what I had to do. The results before were very average. And I felt as though I had something I needed to prove.
You had to redeem yourself.
Exactly.
Get those boys
the
out.
Redemption arc.
It's a kind of meta now.
I had an excellent year. Time to have my redemption arc from old Deathwatch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And show hopefully what it can do now.
And I think I've always found with Saffron Slam that flexing onto something you like that you've not played much is the way to do it. That tends to work out best. And I think obviously it's done very well for you here. So what we're going to do is we'll dive into what the index brings now that we know the restored Deathwatch index, what the kind of key tools in there and how you sort of started going about solving it and building an army list. And I guess we can think about what's changed, if anything, from their index days as well. And then we can talk about Saffron and, matchups and mechanics and the interplay there. So sell this index to me, Jack. Why should someone be interested in playing Deathwatch right now?
You like Space Marines, but you hate the thought of putting 3 Vindicators and 3 Ballistas Dreads on the table.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
You don't like Guilliman, and Deathwing Knights are really boring.
They are.
So you sat there going, well, I like my infantry Space Marines. How can I make this as good as I can make it? And I think if you're going to run mostly to all infantry Space Marines, Deathwatch is the way to do it.
Okay,
it just
fantastic.
gives you some really nice tools for mitigating a lot of the normal issues with Space Marine infantry. When you look at the the actual data sheets for the kill teams and stuff, you get a considerable amount more output than you would from similar units from the Marine Codex.
Yeah.
And you fix a lot of the mobility tools with these issues via the use of the uppy downy stratagems that we've all become so used
We
to.
know that is a powerful tool, right? So you put them on chunky Marines, that's pretty good. That's Grey Knight's going to test. Okay, so if we're thinking about the kind of, I guess, the actual detachment and the source in it, as far as army rule, strats, enhancement, what were your kind of build arounds as you started figuring out a list to take to this event?
So, looking at it, I think there are two kill teams that stand out as being substantially better than everything else in the index, which is the Indominator kill teams and the Talon Striker kill teams.
Yeah.
Now, the main reason for these is because these two units, I would say, have more output than the other Primaris kill teams. The other ones are a little bit more focused towards mission playing, maybe scoring points. But ultimately, at the end of the day, a 10-man unit isn't something you can afford to have going around, doing your actions, being sneaky. So when you spend 300 points on a unit, I want it to kill things and I want it to be hard to kill.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And these two units achieve that through being toughness 6.
Yeah.
The Talon Strike does it. Once you take 5 Inceptors and 5 Jump Intercessors, you use the majority toughness 6. And you just take all the saves on your intercessors, right? So I knew immediately that those are going to form the core of the army. Now, whether you run what combination you run those in is entirely up to the individual and what they like having. I very much like having very symmetrical armies. If you ever look at my list building, there tends to be 2 to 3 of everything because, to be honest, I like just being able to put 1 of everything on each side of the board, or putting something in reserve and putting something in the middle, and just being able to reactively respond how I need to in any game.
Yeah.
So I knew that those four units in this case, 2 of each, were going to make the core of my list. Now, that does immediately bring the list to a good 1,200 points or so. So you're a little light on scoring units. So I decided to just go, screw it, let's add a 5th brick, which is a Deathwatch veteran brick. Now, I know a lot of people are choosing to run those in a Rhino. But I think there's actually a little hidden bit of tech maybe that a lot of people are missing. Which is once you take a Watchmaster with the Beacon Angelus, who gives them advance, fallback, shoot and charge, basically. So they become a fairly mobile unit. But what the Beacon Angelus also gives you is a named use of the rapid ingress stratagem for free.
Ooh, nice.
So what this allows you to set up is you can have turns where you can ingress in 2 of your kill teams.
That's very nice.
Which is a very powerful tool in a number of games, especially when you're trying to bait out your opponent's screening resources, right? So you're not trading 1-for-1 with them.
Yes, because you're obviously quite asset light, right? So you need to make them give you theirs. That's very clever.
The key is you just sit there and you kind of just wait, see what they do. And the nice thing about this Deathwatch veteran unit is it's probably the best melee unit in the book. 4 heavy thunder is no joke as a weapon profile. For the uninitiated, those are 3 attacks at strength 10, AP 2, damage 3 with dev wounds.
Yeah, it's very real. Old school thunder hammers.
they don't screw around. And on top of that, you get a bunch of Marines with average power weapons and shields. So it's not that easy to shift either. It's moderately inexpensive at 200 points. And you just get a lot out of it. It gives you something to get units behind walls and stuff. It gives you ways of baiting your opponent's resources out, which is really important to an army with as few units as this. The supporting elements of my list is 2 Incursor squads. Now, the thing is, when you have these big expensive units, you really need to make sure that they do what you need them to do when you need them to do it, right? Leaving a tank on 3 wounds is not an acceptable situation for units like this. So what the Incursors do is they just give you a cheap unit that skirmishes fairly well, has Scout 6, lets you give the rest of your army +1 to hit, which slightly reduces your dependence on oaths, which is something Marines, I think, really, really do need. Outside of just taking Guilliman, if you're trying to find ways of playing without Guilliman or any of the double oath options, right? And then on top of that, we've got just unit of intercessors, because anytime you can have sticky objectives on an uppy downy faction, it's quite a powerful rule to have, really.
It's very good.
Turn 3, you look at it and you go, well, opponent's reserves are all in now. No, they can't take my home objective. I'll just pick up the intercessors, drop them on a point for the rest of the game, maybe score a secondary with them.
Yeah.
And their output is honestly no joke anymore. Like 5 intercessors with oaths, once you throw in some special issue ammo from Deathwatch, which I'm sure we'll cover later.
Yeah.
A few options going on there. You start looking at a unit that can easily skirmish with other cheap units at that point. And then the final unit I have in my list, which I think this very much is just something I wanted to try. I'm not sure if I'd continue on with it or not, or whether I'd just take more scoring units, is I took a Judicia who has the Thief of Secrets enhancement.
Oh.
Now, this enhancement, I think, is probably the single best melee enhancement buff in the game.
Okay.
Like, giving any character +1 strength, AP, damage is like absolutely insane. Like that's just
very nice.
not okay numbers to give to certain characters. And then once you kill something, you get another +1 in all those stats. So you suddenly have some characters that are very capable of doing some real damage.
Yes.
The reason I put it on a Judicia over a Foot Captain, which I think is what a lot of people do, is the Foot Captain gets dev wounds once per game, whereas the Judicia just has it on his sword all the time.
Yeah.
And the Judicia has precision built in, so you haven't got to spend CP for Epic Challenge or anything.
So he's just going to go around slicing up patriarchs for fun.
Ultimately, having a nice fights first tool is the sort of thing that, it's not useful in every game.
No.
But there are some games where, it's just nice to be able to put a fights first unit behind a wall on an objective.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for an opponent to interact with, right? Because they can contest the objective by giving you a unit, but that unit can't also kill your unit.
Yeah.
So it just has to kind of stand there and contest it, which helps with the managing of the fact that your opponent has way more assets than you.
Yeah.
So you can make them waste their assets without actually getting any.
Yeah. Essentially, they're throwing away stuff to deny that unit. They're throwing away stuff to screen out possible ingresses. They're just giving you stuff in the early game, right?
Exactly. So then once you get to sort of turn 3 and 4, you can really have all of their chaff cleared out, and because you have uppy downy, you get the first strike in on their big stuff.
That makes a big difference.
And let me tell you, when Deathwatch want to have a go turn, I think they way harder than Marines can on their own go turn.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
I think across the course of a game, I think Marines would do more damage, but I think on the one turn you need to do the damage. Deathwatch have that.
That's really exciting. So you can properly put the heat on. Okay. I mean, that's a really cool suite of units, and it does sound like, as you say, the key to using it well is going to be muscling your way into the game without losing any of those big bricks and being able to apply them all at once, right? And that's going to be the knack with it.
Yeah, so... and then on top of that, with the Judicia, I have him attached to 5 Stone Guard.
Okay.
Obviously, I think a lot of people have started to suss on that combat characters with Stern Guard
is quite good, isn't it?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Because, you run in with your reroll wounds. And
exactly. That's so lovely. I'm sure they thought about that as an interaction.
Now, I looked at, just some very basic napkin math is that if I have an oath target in the middle of the board, I don't really want to give them a kill team. Like, let's say it's like, a tank that's like 150 points. I don't really want to give up a 300-point kill team. I send this unit out, a grenade for 3 mortal wounds. I shoot them with the Stern Guard bolt rifles and heavy bolt. I do another 3 or so mortal wounds.
Yeah.
Charge it, maybe get a couple dev triggers from the Judicia, another 6 mortal wounds done. That is most vehicles in the game handled.
Yeah.
Which I think is just a really nice sort of mid-quality unit to have.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest issues with Deathwatch, and also I think Marines in general really, is they have a lot of very good cheap skirmishing units and a lot of very good big hard hitty bricks, and then they don't really have anything in the middle where you're like, well, there's a tank there, I could give them my 300-point unit, or I could not kill it with my 80-point unit.
Yeah.
So I guess I just let it sit there for a turn.
Yeah.
And I think they run into that problem a little bit. So it's just nice to be able to find units and stuff that tackle that situation.
Yeah, and that can actually punch above its weight thanks to the upgrades and the rerolls and everything else. Okay, fantastic. Right, so there's a few things to pick up on then. So you've name checked 2 of the good enhancements, and those both sound very useful. Let's talk about special ammunition. What does that do these days, and how does that factor into the game plan?
Yeah, so basically, all the Deathwatch strats really, or at least 3 of them, are their special issue ammunition. Now, what that does is it lets you give some pretty substantial and powerful buffs to your kill teams. So one of them, I'll be honest, I can't remember what the names of the ammunitions are.
That's
I remember
okay,
what they
Jack.
do. So
I'm
one
sure
of
you and
them
everyone else.
gives you +6 inch range, +1 AP. This
Nice.
is just an obviously really powerful
It's just
buff.
very strong. Yeah.
It it really screws with your opponent's ability to measure threat ranges and stuff, because they can sit there and you'd be like, okay, your melter in that unit's 18. You move 5, okay, that's like 23. But then you tell them, all right, but it could be +6, and then they're like, well, okay, I'll measure 29.
Yeah.
And it's helping you control what your opponent's options are a little more, right? Because they have more things they need to consider. And obviously, +1 AP is just a powerful rule. The reason this stacks up so well is the Talon Strike kill teams, the Jump Pack Inceptor ones. On any turn where they get set up on the board, they also get +1 AP. So for those really hard targets, which is something the list does struggle with a little bit, you can come in, hit something with AP5 Plasma Inceptors, and there's no save, right?
No,
You
there's
take
not.
the agency out of your opponent's hands on a lot of
Yeah.
the second type of special issue ammo is it gives you assault and ignores cover.
Yep.
Again,
Beautiful.
it's just another very powerful range extending rule. The nice thing is because I can do this and the +6 inch range ammo, that obviously they're not the same, but in practicality they're very similar strats.
Yeah.
Ignores cover a lot of the time equates to +1 AP anyway, and assault isn't quite as good as just having flat +6 inch range. But let's say you need to get a slightly harder angle, it just gives you that little bit of extra move to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the third type of ammo. Now, this is the one I thought I was honestly going to be using a lot over the weekend, but I didn't actually use it once.
Interesting.
I think that part of that might be because I didn't play any of the matchups I think where it would be really good.
Okay.
Which gives your kill team anti-infantry 2+, and anti-monster 5+.
Okay.
Now,
Interesting.
there is some obviously very powerful targets to use this stratagem into, right? Like you play Custodes, you're like, oh, you're T6 infantry. Yeah,
I
it's
don't
wound
care.
on twos. Death Guard, again, T6 Terminators. Yeah, it's wound on twos. This is a very, I think, very situational ammunition type, but in the games where it's relevant, is extremely powerful. And I think this stratagem is so powerful, it skews what Deathwatch's matchups are across the board, right? I think the sole existence of this stratagem turns a couple of matchups from being, this could be a little dicey, to no, I think I just win this for turning up and playing well.
Yeah, that just gives you an absolute hammer for elite infantry units, doesn't it? When it comes down to it, they're just not living through that.
Yeah, like it's as simple as having things like, your Indomitor kill teams heavy bolters wounding on 2s, right? And in Deathwatch, these have got lethal hits and damage 3, and they've also got an extra AP. So for these elite infantry units, that it comes out of nowhere as well. It's sort of a lot of the thing with Deathwatch is you see these units that in normal Marines act and function a certain way, and you see them in Deathwatch and you go, well, it must just be the similar thing, but they're just a combined unit. But because the rules for the units are different, you end up having a completely different impact on the game. I think the Indomitor kill teams are a great example of that.
No, it's very effective, and I think what I'm loving about the army as a feel is it feels incredibly like toolboxy. It's very, if it will on paper, if you just shove it out, you're not necessarily going to get a song from it. But if you know what to apply, where to apply it, suddenly it really sings. And I can see why someone techie like yourself is a big fan.
Yeah, it's a really interesting. You get lots of options, just because of how the list is built as well. So, sometimes you have to play this really cagey, cautious game where you pick off key resources here and there, using the double ingress to pull out screens, or because effectively I can just put 40 toughness 6 multi-wound marine bodies.
You can
on the
just
table.
go, right?
I can just go at some lists, and there's not a lot they can do about it. And I think a key part of that is just I think the Deathwatch Index really rewards a good understanding of other armies, how they interact in the game, and what their strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah, no, very, very cool. So obviously that's three of the strats then on the different types of ammunition. The uppy downy is a strat as well, right?
It is indeed,
Yeah.
yes. So
So
it's either 2 kill teams
yeah,
or 1 non-kill team unit.
okay. And how often were you finding you use that all the time? Is that a sort of
that gets used basically every
all
time.
the time? Yeah, just to get those guns in the right places.
Now, I guess if we're talking about stratagems, something I think would be good to cover is how much CP Deathwatch actually have.
That's a very interesting
because
question,
on
Jack.
paper, it looks very normal. There's no extra CP generation. There's nothing like
Okay.
that.
Okay.
But what they do have is 2 different sources of free stratagem, or reduced cost by 1.
Okay.
Now, for a lot of other Marines, these would have the same name. So they don't stack, right? So you can't use one from one captain, one from another captain in the same turn.
Indeed.
But in Deathwatch, they have 2 different names. So for the Watchmaster, there is one name for reducing the CP cost of a strat, and then for the captain, there is another. So you end up with a situation where you actually have quite a lot of free stratagem usage. Especially once you consider the recent FAQ changes where if you have a strat that targets multiple units and one of those units is eligible for the captain to make it for free, they would both get the reduced CP cost. So when you have an uppy downy, for example, if I pick the captain's unit as one of the targets for that stratagem, I get to pick that unit up and another unit up for free. No CP expenditure at all. Likewise, there's a couple other strats where if you target a kill team unit, you get to target a second one, where this becomes very, very powerful. You know, you're looking at Deathwatch having 4 command points per battle round. If they haven't discarded a card or anything,
incredible.
then you're potentially looking at 5 a battle round. And their strats, a lot of strats are highly, not highly situational, but more situational. They have specific uses, times where they're useful. The thing with the Deathwatch core range of strats is most of them are just damage buffs, right?
Yeah.
And damage buffs are always useful to have. There's no time you sit there and you go, well, I can't find a use for +1 AP. I can't find a use for giving my units sustained hits.
And it's just being able to turn on the one you need in the situation you need.
Exactly.
This is the issue. I've been playing Reaper's Wager. The issue that has is it doesn't have enough CP to do all it. If it had a couple of extra CP gen in there, it would be devastating because then you'd have the damage everywhere you needed it.
It's so important to have all of these CP. And like I said, I mentioned earlier with the Beacon Angelis giving you a free rapid ingress as well. On your turn 2, it can feel like you have 7 CP. You know, if you budget your CP well for the first couple of turns, you can have your drop turn and feel like you have enough CP to do every single strat in the book, which just helps you contribute to having that really big damage all-in turn you need when, you know, your screens are running a bit dry, you've a little lighter on resources, and you just need to make sure that you simplify the game state to, I have some big units that kill you, and you have some units that can't kill my big units. So I'm just going to stand here now and win.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as the remaining strats go, what are the last couple of tools in the set?
So one of them is you get to pick 2 units or 2 kill teams to get a mission tactics rule. Now the mission tactics is the detachment rule. They are basically your kill teams get sustained 1, lethal hits, or precision on 6s to hit.
Okay.
That last one not used terribly often,
no, but sustained and lethal sure are.
Sustained and lethal are some pretty powerful, effectively army-wide buffs. It's not
that's
quite
amazing.
Perfectly army-wide, but it's enough units get it that it feels like your whole army has it when you.
That's phenomenal. Okay.
So the key with that strat is it lets you save your sustained hits basically for the really big go turn where you want it on every unit. It just lets you put sustained hits on whatever unit is going to be doing some damage that turn, which is really important. You know, like I said earlier, that it's so important to make sure that you're overcommitted to killing the thing you need to kill, because like I said, when your 300-point bricks don't kill the 200-point tank, and then the 200-point tank might shoot back and kill half your unit, it's just not risk you can afford to take.
No, so you just need to slam the damage through in the right places.
Even if it feels like this is probably unnecessary, you just need to play it safe, make sure you actually do what you need to do in any given turn. You don't have the resources to screw it up.
Yeah, this is not one for pissing about. You just have to actually get the job done, which is very Deathwatch. You know, go in, do the job. You only get one go because everyone's going to die.
And then the last strat is Armor of Contempt, right?
Of course,
just normal, good old Marines.
Good old Armor of Contempt.
Which I think in Deathwatch probably gets a bit more value than it might do in other books,
Okay.
just
Okay.
because of the big brick
Yeah, just
nature.
because of the sheer size of the
Yeah,
thing.
when people want to have the big, big damage in their one go, you just sort of you blunt it a little bit. Maybe you lose a couple less models than you thought you would. So instead of ending the turn with a dead unit, you've got 3 models left, which can just be the difference in getting an extra secondary card, being able to deal with an extra 5-man skirmishing unit somewhere. There's a lot of stuff I think that throws off the numbers in Deathwatch for things trying to kill you.
Yeah.
Having these multi-wound different models in a unit, like with the Talon Strikes, can just mean you survive an extra hit or two where an opponent might not have expected you to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely. I mean, it sounds like a fantastic toolkit. It sounds like you've got the CP spend if you're careful to use it all. So I guess that takes us forward to thinking about your games and your sort of field testing of the detachment. Really, I mean, I guess it's always interesting. I always like to ask people before an event run report going in. What did you think this would be good into, and was there anything that you thought this might not be good into from sort of an outside theoretical standpoint?
So as I hinted at earlier, I think I was sat there going, elite infantry I think is a very, very strong matchup in
Yeah.
general, just
Yeah.
because you blow past so many of their natural defenses.
Yes.
You have such a high amount of mid quality 3 damage shooting
Yeah.
that negates the one thing that they might have against it, which is their
Yeah.
toughness stat.
Yeah.
I think Custodes, I think Blood Angels, Death Guard,
I
Dark
think
Angel. I think a lot of the
it would body aberrants as well. It would just be too
yeah,
much. It would go through
exactly.
them.
I
Yeah,
think GSE is very interesting because almost all my guns are strength 6 or higher, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
look at GSE units. I reckon you could split fire an Indomitor kill team
Just
at 3
hose it.
different units and they
Yeah,
would all die.
yeah.
So I think those are the key strong matchups.
Mhm.
I think things that can be a bit trickier maybe are armies that might have 20 or so units, right?
Right. Okay.
You're talking like orcs at the minute. I
Yeah.
think Drakari can do it.
Hmm.
GSC again probably do it.
Yeah.
Any army that has the ability to just make it so hard for you to trade into them, right? So
Yeah.
even if I bring a kill team out and I kill 3 different units, I might not actually be trading for value in that
Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
I might actually be trading down,
Yeah.
which
And
is
those armies aren't going to give you space to play in either, right?
exactly right. The uppy
Yeah.
downy doesn't work.
Yeah.
You kind of just have to run at them and hope that big toughness 6 space marines with 3 wounds don't just immediately fall over.
Yeah.
And speaking of big toughness 6 space marines, is the cause of another few problematic matchups.
Okay. Interesting.
I think there's a few armies at the minute that are going around that are very capable of not caring at all about that defensive stat line, right? Like you look at Star Shatter, I played it at Saffron. Doomsday Arcs on average pick up, near the Sun King.
It's
They can kill
very
like
violent.
6 models in one activation.
Yeah.
That literally makes their points back in one activation, right?
Yeah.
It's not something you can afford to let shoot you without
Yeah.
you having something to say about it first.
Yeah.
And again, Space Marine Vindicators, not as bad an example because at least you do get a save there, but they're the sort of really scary unit that if
Yeah.
it has a good turn, rolls well, you could easily see
Yeah.
200 points.
So those proper leaf blower lists are still very much a threat if you can't connect.
You have to play extremely carefully against those types of armies.
Fortunately, you're
I
quite
think
careful.
I think as we'll get to earlier, there was a couple of matchups where
Yeah.
you look at it on paper and they have the output to absolutely blow me off the table. But through use of, the sheer toolbox you have to move your army when you want it to, I was able to, capitalize on slight mistakes in their movement, hit them first, not lose a bunch of stuff in return, and just push through the game.
Perfect. Well, that's where we'll go. Let's hear about it. Take us through the games and anything interesting from your matchups.
Yeah, so I starting of the weekend, I admittedly had very, very few games with the new index. Obviously, I was quite comfortable with the old index, which is very similar, so I kind of knew what I was getting into. But I hadn't quite tested all the new units yet. So going into round 1, I played Harry with his lovely Orc Dread mod list.
Oh, Harry.
we I think it was, we wanted to have a fun game. It was a great opportunity, I think, for me to see what my durability can do, see what output I can have when I need it. and just it's a safe game, I think, to just where I just turn up the game, I work out how I'm going to score my points, work out how I'm just going to get ahead on the score, and just chill for a lot of the game.
Yeah.
The key with having 9 units is you have to be extremely careful about how you use them.
Yes.
So you might look at you might see a Gorkanaut on the middle objective and go, oh, normally you'd be like, right, that needs to go now. What can I do to get rid of this?
Yeah.
Whereas with an army with such few units, sometimes you just need to take a step and be like, okay, here I have something that's very hard for me to kill, and the problem with killing it is the math into it is it has a huge amount of variance in it, right? Like my average math probably says I could kill it with a Talon Strike kill team. But because I'm winning it on 5s, because I don't get the improved oaths that normal Space Marines do, it's not. There's huge variance in results. The averages are quite good, but the potential upswing or downswing is really big.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, you can't be trading these units for unconfirmed kills. So in this game, I ignored the Gorkanaut that went to the middle. I went over to my opponent's expansion objective, used the ingressing Deathwatch veteran kill team to continue defending that point. So he went for some charges after that. I brought them in on ingress to threaten a heroic intervention, and just locked the objectives down, won the game at the end because it was supply drop and I had a firm grip on the
Nice.
last objective.
Nice.
But
Nice
in reality,
controlled.
if you actually look at what I killed until turn 3, I think I killed 1 unit of killer cans by turn 3, and I killed almost the whole of the army on turn 4 and 5.
Wow.
You can have huge explosive damage in it.
Yeah. So it's really about massive go turns. Okay.
Yeah. I think after this game, I think is where my matchups get a lot more interesting. So I think for the rest of the tournament, I played games that I would consider quite tricky for Deathwatch to manage in an effective way.
Okay.
So moving on to game 2. I'm sure you've been waiting for this one.
Oh, this is my favourite one. I can't wait.
I played 6++ captain Chris.
Oh, Chris, well, he's not captain anymore because he lost to another 6++
It's true,
at the event.
So that's it.
But former captain Chris Tull. Love you, Chris.
Chris was playing the new Grey Knights detachment.
Yes, the Warplane.
That has a lot less tools, but a lot more damage in it than traditional Grey Knights.
Yeah.
Which is something I'm not going to complain about because I generally prefer just playing lists that have big, simple damage output. There's not a lot less tricks to manage and stuff. I can rely on hopefully just playing around the tricks better, using my toolbox to hit him when he doesn't expect me to. So we get off to a very cagey start in this game. I believe I went first, and I set myself up on my expansion objective. I literally did my recover assets just outside my deployment zone, out of line of sight, and ended turn. Literally, I moved almost nothing. I just made sure that I was screened from potential 6-inch and 9-inch drops from Chris's part, because his output, Dread Knights can be a little dicey on the output sometimes. They're hitting on 3s, winning on 3s. I've got a 5-up save. Throw in AOC, I've got a 4-up save. It's not reliable output from him, but it's also not reliable defenses from my side as well.
No, for
so
sure.
I decide that the safest way of playing the game is to just play the fact that I'm hoping Chris is going to make a mistake at some point. He's going to let me use my big ingress bricks to have a really big go turn.
And Grey Knights are really an army that does not have much to stop that, right?
Exactly.
Like you're so light on units in their side as well.
We both have the same problem. And because I've gone first, Chris has to consider my deep strikes a turn earlier. So what Chris then does is he just sets himself up on an expansion point, does pretty much the same as me, doesn't give me any easy lines from deep strike. So that is the whole of Battle Round 1. Very straightforward. Turn 2, things don't really change. I pick up an Incursor squad and I drop it in to do containment. I do containment on the other side of the map with my Incursors that are set up on my expansion point. And I sit there and I go, okay, Chris, do you want to rapid ingress anything? And he does. I've left the middle objective exposed. He's going to get an extra 5 primary. Some players might go out of their way to try and screen this with a cheap unit, but I don't think you functionally have enough units to let that happen.
Yeah.
And the reality is 5 Purifiers with Crow, for most armies, would be a pretty scary unit. For Deathwatch, they're going to charge in and kill 3 Gravis Marines.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
It. It's not actually that scary.
And you would rather just know where those are and be able to get on with it. Yeah.
So he comes in, kills 3 Gravis Marines with them in his own turn. But importantly, what happens in Chris's turn is because I've put my incursors out to do containment, they are also giving me a zone to drop my Deathwatch veterans in.
Nice.
Because the thing with Grey Knights is they're very mobile, but much like me, they're reliant on deep strike. So if I can put a unit out, I can effectively claim a zone that says you can't put anything within 9 of here, which means I'm always going to be able to bring something in here.
Yeah.
Now this is right on top of Chris's expansion objective, of which point he has a Dread Knight on it, and another 5 Marines. So I pull the double ingress combo. It was during this game where it really clicked that this is a really powerful tool.
Yeah, because you've got that pocket, you know they can't stop it, and then you go.
So I put my 10 vets in that pocket. I bring a Talon Strike kill team out down on my expansion objective to go after a Dread Knight that was just starting to get a little too close to my expansion point. I was a little worried about him being able to contest it for a few turns if I didn't at least tag it at that moment. I'm not too fussed if I don't kill it. If I kill it, it's a great bonus. If I don't, I can tag it. I can take a round of output from the Dread Knight and not die. So anyway, we set all this stuff up, and then we hit the go turn button. So on the go turn for Deathwatch, you have some seriously powerful buffs. So an enhancement I didn't mention earlier is the Tome of Ectoclaves.
Oh yes, I remember this
thing.
That
is pretty infamous. Most people know what that does, but for those that don't, it effectively gives you once per game. It gives you 2 Oath of Moment targets, and it's not like Guilliman's. I don't have to kill the first one, then go after the second. I just get 2 Oath of Moment targets.
Scary.
So, already a pretty terrifying damage buff, but then you throw in the mission tactics. So suddenly I go, okay, this turn, my army is going to have sustained hits as well. So now all of a sudden, the Oath target is like, I've got 4 rerolls to hit against, I've got sustained on 6s. So those don't, I don't need any more support against those 2 targets.
Yeah.
I've still got 2 Incursor squads. Well, I've got 1 Incursor squad at this point, but then that Incursor squad can walk out, take a pot shot at a 3rd target, let me hit it on 2. Then with that and the sustained hits, we're still consistent into that target.
Ouch.
And my follow-up turn is brutal. I high roll a little bit in a couple of places. I think I had 2 frag cannons with the +1 AP ammo, kill 5 purifiers. Definitely shouldn't happen, especially if they're in cover. I'd probably kill like 2, maybe 3.
Yeah.
But wiping the whole unit was a big deal. Then the hammers go in, kill a Dread Knight, Plasma Inceptors, almost kill another Dread Knight, then charge and finish it off. So suddenly Chris is down 2 Dread Knights, Purifier Squad, plus the resources he's lost already, like Crow and the Purifiers from the turn before. And Chris has got all this stuff in his face. He can't get onto the objectives now. He has to spend a turn or 2 killing me. I think if Chris then has a normal rolling turn, I think by the end of the game he can get onto the board and get... I don't think he wins the game, but he at least gets back like a score that is a lot more, I think, representative of how the game normally goes. But in this case, he didn't quite kill me well enough on his return, and I just got to basically run over his army at that point. I killed another Red Knight, killed all half of his Purgation Marines, and it was game.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and that's a very interesting matchup with the way that both can hurt the other and the points of access.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's all about timing your push.
It's when you go
and knowing when to use your resources. Game 3, I played into the new Bridgehead Guard.
Interesting.
Now,
okay.
Awesomely, even though I haven't played this as Deathwatch, I have played against this army quite a few times, being teammates with a
certain Guard fan.
And let me tell you now, that detachment is no joke. It's another army, again, where I really struggle to make efficient trades. So I have to be really careful. I'm on the Crucible map for UKTC. Now, for those that don't know, this is a really annoying map to screen 6-inch hard-hitting blocks on, because you have the little flat ruin in the middle of the map with the little ruin above it. This is where you want to stage most of your army behind. But if your opponent has 6-inch drops, they can easily come in below where that ruin is and just shoot into your deployment zone. So you have to find ways of screening it without sacrificing huge amounts of resources. So my initial thought is, okay, we'll keep an extra kill team off the board to start this game. We'll accept that if I go second, I'm going to have to scout move an Incursor squad to just die.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. It's really unfortunate. You don't want to lose a unit with 9 units to start with, but if it at least lets me get a Scion unit out into the open, maybe then I can kill it with like the Stern Guard or something that's like a mid-quality unit, and we can go from there. Fortunately, I go first, so I can screen that out. I got a little bit of value by shooting some rattlings with the curses turn 1. And I fortunately drew Secure No Man's Land, so I could also use that unit to get value from there. So I didn't feel too bad about losing it. I set myself up on my expansion objective, which, if you haven't seen the new KTC maps, is extremely easy to defend if you have a moderate amount of OC.
Yes, it's very interesting on Crucible.
So I just put 5 Marines on it and went, you can't get in range to deny this. I can see what your options are. You haven't got quite enough movement from where you are to contest this. So I'm just going to put 5 Incursors on it. I'm going to put one of my kill teams behind the little ruin at the back, screen out your 6-inch drops, and just see if my opponent wants to do anything. So we get to his turn 1. He drives his Rogel Dawn up the side of the map. I think he realizes fairly early on that if he lets me just sit behind the building, I'm eventually going to be able to contest his expansion with Rapid Ingress and Deep Strike. So he starts trying to make a push towards there. He comes out, kills the 5 Incursors that are in the middle. Now, obviously, the nice thing about Space Marines is their defensive profile into everything is no joke.
Yeah.
Like, 5 Marines is still 5 Marines. You're
it's
not
still a pain
to kill that with 10 Guardsmen.
Yeah, trivially, you're never getting rid of it trivially.
And from his point of view, he can't really risk me having a 1-man unit that I can just screen the bottom of my board with for another turn. So he comes out fairly hard to hit it turn 1. Like I said, he uses the Dawn. He uses one of his Katachan units, just came out to contest the point, which doesn't seem like a lot, but I've pulled 300 points worth of stuff out. It's a good start for the trading game. So then we get to my turn 2, and I'm like, okay, we'll pick the Talon Strikes up because I want the extra AP this turn. Do it for free because this is the captain's unit, and then I just go from there. Really, it was the only unit I picked up that turn. I advanced my intercessors out. I used my Indomitor kill team to actually screen my backfield, which is not an easy choice to make, but ultimately I can't have him 6-inch dropping into my backfield, but I also can't use my Indomitor kill teams as the frontline screening because his trades are just too valuable. And being out of position a little bit is fine because I have access to uppy downy, so when we need to get that unit onto the board, I can still do it. I pick the Rogel Dawn as my oath target. I do the sustained hits on the Inceptors squad, the Talon Strikes. I come in and I use just this Talon Strike kill team to go after this Dawn. Unfortunately, if you know anything about Dawns, they're a little bit unreliable when it comes to trying to kill them sometimes. So I think I leave it on 3 wounds.
So often they can just absorb that one turn.
Yeah, now don't get me wrong, safe, maybe I commit another unit out to kill it, but it's too expensive, it's not worth it. 300 points to try and kill 300 points nearly, fine. 600 points to kill 300 points. He's going to get to trade up big time next turn. I'm going to be behind on resources, and I'm not going to be able to thin out the Scion bricks. So we get to his follow-up turn. He's got a bunch of units set up on his expansion objective, and this is another game where the double rapid ingress really comes into its own. So he pushes his Dawn up. Well, actually, he leaves his Dawn where it is because I'm going to Overwatch it because it's the oath target. It's got 3 wounds left. I will 100% pull the trigger on that Overwatch. So he doesn't move it. He brings one of his bricks in to shoot the intercessor squad that's just threatening the bottom of the board now because it rolled a decent advance. It's got a good way up the board. Does need to remove it, and he doesn't really have any other ways of getting to it. But like I said, this opens him up to the double ingress. So again, I get to drop the Deathwatch vets in at the bottom of the map near his expansion objective. The only thing that can shoot these is the Rogel Dawn. But the Rogel Dawn has already got other things it wants to shoot, my Inceptors. And I drop my Talon Strike kill team in behind the little middle ruin in the middle of the board. Because, with a decent advance roll next turn, I can go out, shoot into his deployment zone. If I have a really good turn next turn, I'll pick up the Dawn. I'll pick up maybe a couple of the Scion units.
And that's getting you that full activation. Get your shooting, get your charging, all of it. Yeah.
We get I think I get 5 or 6 units in one turn. And at that point, it doesn't matter if he kills a unit or 2 of mine. He's too far behind on the assets. I'm on all the objectives. He can't get me off before the end of the game. So we finish the game. He gets a decent endgame primary score,
Mhm.
but it's not enough to catch me because I've been all over the midboard for 3 turns at this point. And
That's
I
an
think we
interesting
finished
one, the
that game.
Bridgehead. So as a matchup, did that feel good, or does that feel like one that gets
I
tough?
think it's very tricky.
Yeah,
It's again, like I said, I think for the last 3 games, it's all games where
there's a
it's
lot of lost
definitely it's
conditions.
hard to manage. There's a lot of lost conditions. You need to be very careful about how you're applying and using your units.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, that's a good
it's
scout.
good.
Well done.
Good, excellent end to day 1.
Yeah.
3-0. We go into go have some food. I see my round 4 pairings, and it's the new boogeyman, Star Shatter Nate.
Star Shatter.
Now,
Okay.
this again pretty scary on paper because you look at the average math for a Doomsday Arc. It's picking up 6 Gravis Marines each time it shoots. Silent King, quite hard to kill. He's just got a lot of very efficient anti-infantry units. Like he's got 2 of the Locust Heavy Destroyer bricks with the anti-infantry guns.
Mm-hmm.
This is very much a game where if I let him, he'll easily trade up, and we're looking at, again, a pretty bad time.
Yeah.
Now, I misdeployed a little bit during this game, which made one of my turn 1 choices very tricky. So I started my normal Deathwatch Vet squad and 1 Talon Strike off the board. I've done that pretty much in every game, didn't change it much. And he what I didn't consider was he had a unit of 10 Flayed Ones. I thought they would go sit on his expansion point because we're playing the Corners deployment on UKTC. I was like, okay, he'll put them on his expansion point. I'll ignore them for 2 turns. That's fine. But what he actually does is he goes and puts them behind the wall on my own expansion point.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I haven't really... I've put nothing in position that can really contest this unit turn 1.
Yeah.
My Stern Guards unit could do it, but I need a good charge roll. 5 incursors probably aren't going to cut it. But what my opponent has done is he's given me a very thin line from the middle of the board to the Flayed Ones. So I make the very tricky choice to give up an Indomitor kill team turn 1.
Okay.
I advance it out into the middle. I do not put it on the middle objective. It's very important to do Star Shatter that if you can't hold the objective, don't put it on the objective.
Yeah.
And pop the assault and ignores cover ammo, and the Indomitor kill team probably could have killed it twice over.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Going
Yeah,
up to
Flayed Ones
strength
do go
6.
down pretty hard once they're targeted.
Once all your guns hit strength 6, you've got some AP in there, you've got some blast in there, you've got ignores cover. They do just go down. And importantly, because of how the unit's positioned, he kind of has to split up his Doomsday Arcs for where they can get line of sight a little bit, which means they can't both get the Silent King buff. So next turn, he shoots this Indomitor kill team. Because he rolled a low advance from the Doomsday Arcs, it's got a very thin line to one of them, and he's going to have to shoot that one first. He also, because he's a little bit worried at this point that 2 Doomsday Arcs without Silent King buffs and me not being on the objective market is going to fail to kill it, he pokes one of his Locust Heavy Destroyer bricks out.
Okay.
Now, from my point of view, this is perfect scenario.
This is great, yeah.
I've got all 3 of the 4 units I need to get rid of really quickly in the game, in line of sight.
Yeah.
So once again, he doesn't give up any of his little units to screen out my ingresses. Again, probably because it doesn't matter too much. I can still reach the Doomsday Arcs because I've got Talon Strikes on the board. I can also just ingress them in behind a building and have enough movement to do it. But because he hasn't screened me, I get to bring the Deathwatch Vet unit in really close to his expansion objective again. This is probably becoming a common theme, is rapid ingressing Deathwatch Vets near your opponent's expansion objective works out pretty well.
Yeah, I love it. I'm here for it.
It's a very potent unit, right? And it's not super expensive for the output and durability it provides. So I ingress these units in. He shoots first Doomsday Arc, kills 4 of the Indomitor kill team. I get to pull the Locust Heavy Destroyers out of line of sight at this point. And the other Doomsday Arc whiffs it, only kills 1 model, and I've only lost 5 models, and my opponent has traded me 3 of his 4 damage pieces.
Yeah.
So
that's going to get quite rough now, I think.
we double oath, we pop sustained hits again.
Yeah.
And because Deathwatch Vets get reroll hits versus Xenos anyway, I effectively have like a 3rd extra oath target. I'm very careful not to fall into the reactive move trap on the vehicles. I make sure that I don't shoot any incursors at them to try and get +1 a hit because he's just going to move away.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get to shoot him with my big output units, and I give him a way back into the game. I know this turn if I can kill 3 of these 4 units, It's probably game.
Yep.
So we give him all my units. I bring out all the remaining of my kill teams. We put everything on the board. And throughout that turn, we do only just get the second Doomsday Arc because the Plasma Inceptor shot it. He reacted, moved back because I didn't quite kill it. And I could only see it with one Eradicator, who then rolled 5 for damage and killed it anyway. But, sometimes you just roll good.
Just be lucky.
The Indomitor kill team, the 10-man one that was still alive, got to one-shot the Locust Heavy Destroyer Brick that poked its head out, and the remaining 5-man got to run in, shoot a little bit at that Doomsday Arc, do a little bit of shooting at some Ophidians. Didn't do a whole lot, but they were right in front of my opponent. He now had to kill them next turn. While on the other flank, the Talon Strike kill team moved over, did 12 damage or so to a Doomsday Arc again. And something that's probably worth mentioning at this point is how hazardous checks work for this unit. So obviously you've got 5 Plasma Inceptors that have these very valuable guns, very valuable members of the unit.
Yeah.
You also get 3 Jump Intercessors who get Plasma Pistols. So how hazardous checks work for those who don't know is I can roll my hazardous checks for my Inceptors, but I can choose for the Jump Intercessors to die because they are also...
Because they have Plasma. Yeah.
Which means that Inceptors die a lot less quickly than people remember them doing.
Yeah,
I can shoot really all 10 of them in a turn and lose none of them.
Yeah.
And I thought it was worth mentioning at this point, just because we haven't mentioned it yet, and it's something really important to keep in mind. I believe someone also asked me on your Discord about whether I was worried about the captain being toughness 4. The answer is no, because if your opponent ever interacts with you before you interact with them, you're going to have real issues.
Yeah,
very
it's
quickly.
all about dictating the terms of engagement, isn't it?
Every engagement has to be on your terms, otherwise you are just going to lose. You don't have the resources to let them do it.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have this big go turn. There's not really much more to add after this.
Not a lot of Necron left at that stage.
We're covering the board. It's Scorched Earth. By the end of the game, I've gotten to his home objective and burned it. It was a pretty one-sided affair at this point.
Okay.
Again, I think looking back on it, it's a hard matchup to navigate. But as always with toolbox armies, if you approach it right, you make the right choices when you need to. You have outs, and your opponent can make mistakes.
And you have the big killer activations to give them problems, right? And that's the thing.
And the thing is, when I know I have my big killer go turn, it is a go turn.
Yeah.
I can be confident 2 of my opponent's units will disappear. Doesn't matter how scary they are, it will die. I think a lot of people are very familiar with how hard the Silent King is to kill in this detachment. He got killed by 2 kill teams activating, so it's they can do the work when they need to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we get to my last game, and again on paper it's an absolutely horrendous matchup. I think this is by far the worst one of the weekend. Is a Soul Forged War Pactalist with 3 Forge Fiends in it. Now, if there's one thing I don't want to see with my big 10-man 3-Loon Marine units with a moderately okay save and no invuln, it's a Forge Fiend that's going to average get 12 shots at potentially hitting on 2s re-rolling, at potentially AP4, damage 3 with +1 to wounds, sustained, dev wounds.
Those things are just ready-made to delete kill teams.
I'm pretty sure the average math, because I had a quick run through it before the game, it kills like 9 if it gets to activate. So I know I'm in for a real tricky game if I don't dictate the terms of engagement here. Now we're playing Burden of Trust. We're doing the Crucible UKTC map again, so with a very defendable expansion point, which is great for me because he actually struggles to threaten stuff behind the wall. He's got the move through wall strat, but it doesn't let you go through models, so you can still force them to take the long way around if you need to. And ultimately, a Venom Crawler is going to kill like 2 Marines if I AOC at most, really. So it's not really a huge threat. So get very lucky. I go second. I think this is a pretty important role for the game. I'm pretty sure if I have to go first, this gets really tricky for me to win. But we go second. He pushes a Mauler Fiend up and to start threatening my expansion because I think he recognizes I'm going to do as little as I can in this game. I'm going to give him the bare minimum for screening just so that he doesn't bring a Forge Fiend in at the bottom and insta-nuke some of the kill teams. And I have a very bare minimum turn next. I made a bit of a mistake with my scout move with one of the incursors up top of the map. We scout moved out, Turns out he could get LOS from a venom crawler near the bottom of the map. We lost 3 of them. It's annoying because it now means I can't really use that unit to hold the objective because I'm going to take battle shock tests every turn. I can't really afford to have a turn where I'm going to fail one. So what we do to sort of recover from this turn is he can't bring any of his reserves in my deployment zone because it's all strat reserves, so I don't have to worry about screening the back of the board. So I sack my intercessor squad to run out into the bottom of the map again, just to go, okay, fine, you kill this unit, I'll accept it. And because of how far he's pushed up the Mauler Fiend, I'm able to do something quite sneaky here, where I cut the thinnest possible line to its Lasher Tendril from behind my expansion ruin. And I push my incursors far enough forward that he can't bring a Forge Fiend in front of where the Mauler Fiend would have been. So it can only exist on that same line. I didn't quite roll a high enough advance on them to push the Forge Fiend behind that line, which is unfortunate. If I could push the Forge Fiend behind that line, I'd be in a really good spot, but we didn't quite get it. So as is quite common at this point for the Talon Strike kill team, it did leave the Mauler Fiend on 3 wounds.
Okay.
It happens. Like I said, I'm not willing to commit a second unit to the problem. We're just going to accept that that's happened and stop worrying about it. It's oathed. It's got 3 wounds left. I'm just going to overwatch it if it moves, and he kind of has to move it because it means he can't bring his Forge Fiend in where he wants to shoot me otherwise. So he moves the Mauler Fiend. We kill it with Overwatch because we've got Oath and 4 rerolls. Excellent. And then the Forge Fiend comes in where I thought it would. And because he's so worried about my go turn output of me being able to hit him first, once again, he doesn't put any real shooting on a lot of the firing lanes.
Right. Okay.
So I'm looking at this Forge Fiend and I go, well, I think we know what we're going to do. We're going to double ingress in again with the Deathwatch veteran kill team at the bottom of the map near his expansion objective. And I'll put the Talon Strike in the middle of the board where it can go into basically the heart of his deployment zone next turn and threaten his Vindicator, his 3rd Forge Fiend, and then just threaten to tag all of it and be a huge harassment piece. So he elects to shoot the one that's going to be a huge threat to him next turn. I made sure to at least leave most of the intercessors in the middle ruin just so I'd get cover save. So I could, if he doesn't pop the +1 AP, I could pop AOC, have a 4-up save. If he doesn't roll too well on the devs, I'm not going to lose too many models. He chooses to shoot this unit. It's a big threat to him. Unfortunately, I roll really well on my saves with Armor of Contempt because he does pop the +1 AP, but 2 jump intercessors eat the first 6 hits. So he kills a few models, and it's such a big deal because it now means next turn that Forge Fiend dies. I've pushed these Inceptors up near his deployment zone, and he's quickly realizing he's going to run out of ways to contest my expansion point. Because at this point, I've taken his expansion off of him again. It's going to be a couple of turns before he gets it locked down. Because it's Burden of Trust, he's missing all of the guarding points as well, whereas I've managed to get them for 2 of my objectives for multiple turns now. And he's realizing he's going to fall behind. He ingresses on one of his Forge Fiends, the last one, so that he can move it forward next turn and try and get me off my expansion point. But because I threaten the charge on his other units, he chooses to overwatch my Talon Strike again. And unfortunately, he does 6 damage to himself. Just as Forge Fiends do sometimes, leaves him on 6 wounds. So when he goes to move this Forge Fiend up again next turn to shoot the Inceptors at the back that keep shooting him, we overwatch again and we kill it. There's no oaths this time, but it's such a big deal because now my expansion objective is really locked down. I've gone second. I've taken his expansion for a turn. And
it's very hard to get out.
Absolutely still has the output to kill me if I come onto the table now. But what I do know is that he's behind on points. I have endgame advantage. So I spend the last 3 turns sitting behind 3 buildings, putting out the bare minimum I need to for my secondary cards each turn, and just
keep it tight.
A small win at the end.
Absolutely. Very well executed. And it's interesting. It sounds like your list has the tools to push on to more gunliney armies quite effectively, right? That's something where you can pick your moment, get enough of a primary lead with that push that you're then in a strong position, and they really can't push you because if they come too close, you're going to body them.
And I think a lot of it is that even if your opponent can kill 3 wound bodies, there's very few armies that can make 43 wound bodies go, or not 40, so like 40 toughness 6 models go away in
Yeah.
a turn, right?
It's a lot.
It's a lot to deal with. So it just gives you the option to go all in when you need it. You don't quite die on the clapback. You just have to make sure that your go turn is set up as well as you can have it set up, and that you haven't lost anything to silly mistakes and stuff. I think it's probably quite a punishing army to play if you're not very tight with your screening and you're not communicating with your opponent about what you want to do. I think this is one of those armies where it's very, very important you talk to your opponent about what you're trying to have happen, what you're trying to avoid. Because if one little thing goes wrong, it can kind of landslide into some pretty big problems.
Yeah, for sure. No, congratulations. That's a really solid event win. And I guess if you were trying to estimate, obviously everyone's always interested in the relative power of all these things, but where does this put newly returned Deathwatch? Are they in a good spot here, do we think? Or is it going to be a niche case?
I think their problem at the minute is, I think compared to normal Marines, I do think they're worse. I think normal Marines at the minute, let's be honest, are incredibly
They're very
powerful.
Good. Yeah.
The buffed oaths is a big part of it. As I said before, Marines' damage output across the game is more consistent. It's a lot better. Deathwatch have that all-in big go turn, hard-hitting power.
Yeah.
But what I think they might be really interesting is, I think a lot of people are probably suspecting Marines will get toned down a little bit in the next update, maybe.
Maybe.
Don't know what form that will take, but let's say they do get toned down. Let's say Oaths gets changed back to what it was before. Deathwatch look in a really good place to just sort of become the Marine choice, right? Because they have that output that the +1 to wound would otherwise give them through lethal or sustained hits, which mathematically are very similar buffs. And I think in the overall meta, I think they're probably quite interesting for teams. There's always going to be boards, maps, armies where just plonking 40 T6 bodies down is going to win you games.
Yeah.
And because it's a very toolboxy army, it's very hard for people to push into it if they don't have the right list. And it just gives you options for always playing the game. You can play a really safe, cautious game, scrape your way to a pretty even point score. But because you have uppy downy and this huge output, if your opponent makes a mistake, you can really push them. And I think it's a very rewarding army for people who are willing to take the time during games to work everything out. Take your time. You haven't got many models, so you can afford to spend a few extra minutes just making sure that everything's going to go how you want it to, and that you're making the most of all your tools, right?
Absolutely.
If every turn, if you're not using like 3 out of your 6 stratagems, you're probably not applying the army in the right way.
Completely.
You're not, situationally using one unit to really kill something when you need it to. It's a very rewarding index, I think. And I think if you're a little bit bored of standard Marines and you want something a bit more dynamic to play, I think a lot of Marine players would enjoy playing it. There's a lot of the same comforts you get from normal Marines, but you just get that feeling that you get to do a little bit more than just shove 6 2-up save vehicles at your opponent and go, oh, sorry, I've got 2 oaths this turn, so you're really going to die, and you'll have been steering them forward doing whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it sounds really rewarding. I think I'm very relieved that Deathwatch got brought back and get to be in the game for the rest of the edition. I think people will have a lot of fun with this detachment. So well done for getting out there and exploring it and showing everyone what can be done. Jack Tite, thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure. We'll have to have you back very soon. Maybe if you do something exciting in a few days' time, another event with a different army, maybe we'll talk about
it. I'm looking forward to that one, and hopefully we'll have a lot to talk about. So.
I imagine we will. I'm usually very good at booking these in just before I'm going to have a lot to talk about with someone. We will see. All right. Thank you everyone for listening. Do hit the like and subscribe if you haven't. We'll see you all again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.